Welcome to EdTech Monday Nigeria, which is brought to you by Mastercard Foundation in partnership with Co-Creation Hub Limited. The EdTech Monday is a platform to facilitate critical conversations on the use of technology for teaching and learning by bringing together key stakeholders, including policymakers, EdTech entrepreneurs, teachers, and parents. Thank you all so much for joining us on this episode of the show. My name is Joyce Daniels, your regular host. Our topic for this episode is EdTech as an enabler of education for learners with disabilities. EdTech, that is education tech, as an enabler of education for learners with disabilities. Over 400 million children living in Africa, and data from the World Health Organization shows that 10 to 15% of those of school-going age live with a disability. Estimates show that out of the 65 million primary and secondary school-age children who have disabilities, close to half of them are out of school. Although data on learners living with disabilities in Nigeria is lacking, the National Population Commission of Nigeria has estimated that no fewer than 19 million Nigerians are living with disabilities. Persons with disabilities often experience negative attitudes at family and community levels, and aside negative religious and cultural beliefs and misconceptions surrounding the causes of disabilities, persons with disabilities also face difficulties accessing quality social services such as health, public transport, and education, amongst others. Studies have shown that exclusion of persons with disabilities from education has negative long-term economic consequences in the form of lost or diminished income. Nevertheless, EdTech is proving to be an enabler of access to education for all, including learners with disabilities. However, in spite of the immense inclusionary possibilities technology offers and the proliferation of EdTech in Nigeria, innovations in EdTech geared toward learners with disabilities are still woefully limited. On this episode of the show, the discussion will focus on how EdTech can be used to increase access to education for learners with disabilities. We'd love to hear from you, our listeners. What actions need to be taken to leverage education for learners with disabilities? Join our Telegram channel, EdTech Monday Nigeria, or send us a text or WhatsApp message on 0703-165-0809. That is 0703-165-0809, and let us know what you think. We have an array of panelists who are ready to discuss the topic, EdTech as an enabler of education for learners with disabilities. Our first panelist is Oluwatomisin Kolawole, also known as Tomi for short. He's a doctor and a biomedical engineer, passionate about using the power of innovation and entrepreneurship to drive social impact and development in Africa. He was United Nations MCN's campus director at the University of Ibadan, where he led and trained 20 social impact enthusiasts on innovation, social impact, and leadership. Tomi is currently the CEO of Vinsight, a digital health company which uses artificial intelligence to aid visually impaired persons to read and navigate their environment independently. Under his leadership, Vinsight has grown to enact her impact across Nigeria with over 5,000 visually impaired persons impacted. In 2021, he received the Commonwealth Innovation Award for Sustainable Development in honor of Vinsight's social impact in Africa. Tomi, it's a delight and a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure.
Welcome. Also with us is Olajide Funsho Benjamin, who is the founder and executive director of Disability Not a Barrier Initiative, DNAB Nigeria. He is an experienced development worker with relevant expertise on issues relating to disability rights, inclusive education, accessible health, water, sanitation and hygiene, WASH, good governance, and livelihood development, amongst others. He is a person with physical disability. He is a graduate of computer engineering. Benjamin is also the current General Secretary of the Joint National Association of Persons with Disabilities, Ekiti State Chapter. He is the convener of Ability Skills, which is a free digital skills training for students and youths with disabilities to prepare them for the journey ahead, both in academics and in the labor market. He's married with children, and for today's sake, I will call him Dinabi. Welcome.
Thank you so much. And then good day to all our listeners and viewers at home. Nice meeting you, Joyce.
What a pleasure to have you with us. From the Disability Rights Advocacy Center, we have Amaka Ugu. She has served in the development space for almost a decade, and she's passionate about all things. She is the head of programs at Disability Rights Advocacy Center. Welcome, Amaka. Delighted to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be on this platform, to share my own view. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. So we jump into the questions, and the first one will go to Dinabi and Amaka. I hope you don't mind me calling you Dinabi today.
It's all right. It's all right.
All right. What is the status of learners with disabilities in Nigeria? What kind of education facilities are available for them, or what lack of facilities do we have? Usually it's said ladies first, but I would like Dinabi to go first today, please, if you don't mind.
It's all right. All right. Thank you so much, and thanks for having me here. And then special thanks to the facilitators and the conveners of this event. Of course, the status of learners with disabilities in Nigeria is in a deplorable state, if I must say. In Nigeria, we are practicing a special education system where, they separate students with disabilities in one school, whereas ordinarily it was supposed to be an inclusive education system, a mainstream education system where you have students with disabilities and students without disabilities, learning together within the same environment. And then, for persons with disabilities, I think they have been excluded as far as the issue of educational system in Nigeria is concerned. And then, of course, you agree with me that the educational system that we have in Nigeria, especially for persons with disabilities, is grossly underfunded. You agree with me on that. And then we do not have, lots of specialists in terms of, education of persons with disabilities. We do not really have that skills, those personnel that are skilled enough to be able to, tutor these kids. So to me, I think the status of the education of persons with disabilities in Nigeria is not okay enough.
Thank you. I'm sure we'll also profess solutions to some of these challenges in the course of our conversation. Amaka, what would you like to add to that?
Building on just what he said, if you go to some of the schools that we have available, especially the special schools, you are going to cry for the learners with disabilities in those schools. Those schools have been abandoned. For instance, if you go to School for the Blind in Jos, Plateau State, you will just cry. You can't believe that a human being is learning in that condition. There are no facilities, no library for them to learn. Most of them, the buildings have collapsed. Some of them have to learn under the tree, and the school is so porous that we heard the stories of that Boko Haram passes through those schools to do whatever they want to do. The students who are blind students complain about men coming to the hostel to sleep with them on bed, men who are stranded, who doesn't have any place to stay. They just sneak in at night. And you can imagine the kind of experiences, even in terms of sexual violence that they'll be experiencing within those schools. And the worst part of it is that even some parents use special schools as opportunity to abandon their children. Most of them feel, because I have a child with disability, I don't know what to do about it. I don't know what to do with them. And they go to those special schools. There is a child who have been left there for over 3 years, and the school is just the one responsible for catering for it. So if you hear the horrible stories and the kind of facilities that these children are learning in, you will just know that the situation is really, really terrible. And when it comes to, we talk about accessibility a lot, it's not just the physical accessibility in terms of the environment, but we also look at what are the facilities that the teachers have to be able to even adequately train or educate these students. The teachers do not have even enough knowledge about what it means to support a child with disability to learn. And so most of them end up dropping out. Some parents just get tired of having their children learning in that environment, and they just put them out of school and just keep them at home. And so you see most of them end up not having the kind of education that they need.
So before we talk about some of the solutions, I'll ask another question to Amaka and Dinabi again. What challenges do the learners with disabilities face? They said what the status is, but what are the challenges of the individuals? And then how can EdTech enable them overcome these challenges or some of them? Amaka, would you like to go first?
One of the biggest challenges that the learners with disabilities face is the inaccessible, learning environments. A lot of the learning environments are totally off limits for children who are already vulnerable. There are schools, for instance, you see the school bays are not even accessible for those who use wheelchair. The schools are very not well lightened for students who are, with low vision, and they are not able to comfortably participate. Some of them even complain of being kept at the back of the class. And so for someone with low vision, how does that person, see what the teacher is teaching? And, sometimes teacher really, because they don't have that understanding of what it means to support a child with disability, does not understand. You said you have, for instance, a child with albinism, you're wearing glasses. You should be able to see. Why do you need to sit in front of the classroom? When a child with disability is brought to school to be registered, they are being turned away because people feel like, oh, it's a child with disability, will not have the capacity to be able to learn, on the same level as other students.
My experience in using EdTech for learning has been so interesting in the sense that it makes learning easy at the comfort of your house, your habitation, your domain, without much stress or expensing energy. Most especially we of one disability or the other, sitting at the comfort of your house with your mobile phone or your laptop and learning what you will eventually gain in class helps a lot, and it saves time and energy. So it has been of great importance to me and people around me.
So Dinabi, you'd speak to how EdTech can help overcome some or the challenges, or if possible, how?
Okay, thank you so much. Of course, I believe that there are a lot of things that EdTech can enable us to be able to overcome some of these challenges. And this will go to some of the software developers, especially on the development of a less expensive teaching aid. Let me say softwares or applications that can aid teaching of learners with disabilities. Because you know that finances this day, and generally in Nigeria, is very hard to come by, most especially for parents of learners with disabilities. So if some of the softwares and applications that can aid learning can be less expensive, that will go a long way. And then some of these softwares and app applications can also be localized, that will be able to accommodate the peculiarities of our area in Nigeria. Then I think special educators, or let me say personnel, can also be trained on the importance of using technology in education, especially in educating learners with disabilities. Then there is also the need for us to create awareness on the issues of learners with disabilities, and the use of tech. If we don't create that necessary awareness, for people to be aware, even for duty bearers to be aware, for parents to be aware, we may not be able to make the necessary impact that we really wanted to make. Then there's also the need for us to advocate for the review of the national education policy in order to be able to inculcate some of these issues around using EdTech, to support learners with disabilities. So there is an holistic, it requires an holistic review of the policies and some of our legal frameworks.
Thank you for that question. For every existing system, there is always a need for upgrade. EdTech has been impactful, but there are ways in which it must be improved. You just mentioned about people with who have a vision impairment, or people with hearing impairment. Such people still need to be considered in the development of platforms that can self-pronounce or self-read a screen and interpret diagrams for people of that category. Not like we that can see and hear. Those people have some challenges they are facing in that area. Also, concerning this platform, this EdTech program, and the facility they are putting in place to help education, many people with disability cannot afford the gadget for these resources to be used online. Not all of them are getting fully employed. Some are in an environment where they cannot even afford to buy a smartphone. So they need to be empowered or to be assisted in that regard. Also, in a country like Nigeria, we still have some remote places where the internet connections there are very poor. So even though if you have a mobile phone, a smartphone, you have a laptop, any kind of gadget, a tablet, the connection there will not allow you to learn properly or as you wish because of the poor internet connectivity. So in that regard, I think EdTech can still improve on technology that can bring or draw internet or networks or build platforms that are internet free. Let me put it that way. Internet free for people in the remote areas so that in the comfort of their zones, they can still access and make use of these EdTech resources.
Can I quickly add to that?
Amaka. Yes, please.
Yeah, so
very quickly.
I also wanted to, very quickly to highlight that, EdTech for learners with disability is something that is really very important that many of us don't get to talk about, especially looking at, accessible ebooks, looking at making accessible e-libraries, so that students are able to have access to materials that they need. Most of our education facilities do not incorporate some of these things, even though we have a little knowledge about that. Looking at brailles and some of the assistive technologies that are very important for blind students, like the screen readers and all of that. Those are all components of tech that can support learners with disability to fully have access to education, like their peers.
Therefore, we need more partners and more awareness to get this solved. Thank you so much. The next question is for all of us is, what are the barriers to making EdTech more accessible to learners with disabilities? Tomi, I would like you to start with.
One of the major challenges, I would say, that affects people with disabilities from the technology perspective is, most of people with disabilities are not exposed to the fact that there are actually resources available that can aid them to be able to do things seamlessly they are used to. So I think exposure is one major thing. And the second one is actually understanding how to use these resources, because for instance, I don't know if you can hear me clearly. Okay. So for instance, one of the is an AI solution that helps vision impaired to be able to read. And one thing we noticed was most times when we give the person with disabilities the solution, understanding how to use it is always a problem. So we always have to train them. So one other major one is them not really being able to use it because they don't understand how to use it yet. For training, opportunities for helping persons with disabilities to be able to easily have access to these things and train them how to use it. Are major things that can be used to, really remove the barriers that are currently, hindering them from being able to enjoy technology.
All right, thank you so much, Amaka.
I think like the first speaker just mentioned that the ease of use is very important. And so when people are using assistive EdTech and they do not understand how it works, and it becomes difficult for them to even accept it. So for ease of acceptance, it's very important that we make this ed technology, train them, make them to understand how it's being used, and make sure that it is person-centered. So people are using it because they need to use it, and it is tailored specifically for their needs, not in a general form. And I think also the issue of awareness is very important. A lot of people do not even know what it means. They don't understand EdTech, they don't understand how it works, they don't understand it. Most people have not even heard about it. So I think we need to start looking at how do we, create awareness and people, because when people are knowledgeable about something, they even begin to demand for it. So it's not just the actors who are the one making noise and requesting for this to be included in our education for learners with disability, but that they even themselves become the voice, and that can only happen when they understand how important it is for them. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Nabi.
Okay. So, of course, amongst the barriers that I know is also insufficient funding. And I believe that everybody alluded to that fact. And another one is the issue of corruption. I know that it is very endemic in our country. In a situation whereby fund will be budgeted for, and at the same time even released to some of the implementers of the projects. But at the end of the day, it is another thing that you will see at the sport of the project. So it's so unfortunate. Then we also have the lack of political will on the part of the duty bearers to implement some of the legal frameworks that we have. We are talking about the national policy on inclusive education. We are talking about the National Disability Act, and several other states in Nigeria also have their individual disability law. And all these laws and acts and legal frameworks and policies, they all have components of inclusive education in them. But at the end of the day, there is no political will to implement some of these. And I think others have also spoken about the issue of lack of awareness. And then it is also critical to point out that even some of the special educators lacks the necessary expertise to make use of some of these devices or technological devices. And the moment they don't even have the technological know-how, you don't expect them to be able to impact that knowledge on the learners.
Thank you. I'll come back to you right now because you've mentioned policies, you've mentioned one for 2018 and others. We'll ask you to expatiate what policies are in place to ensure tech innovations support equitable learning solutions for learners with disabilities. When you speak, I would ask Tommy to also make some input to this question.
Okay, so for instance, under the National Education Policy, National Policy on Inclusive Education in Nigeria, there's a section there that talks about, using assistive devices to support learners with disabilities. And that will bring about, using various devices, using various, for instance, now, even our public schools that are mainstream schools, how many of them have such let me say something like projector? Very small thing, just the use of the projector. How many of them have it? Very few, or even none at all. For the visually impaired, sometimes they require what we call audio recorders. When they do not see, they only hear, and the moment you talk once, if they cannot assimilate, it means that they cannot go back again to look at what you have written on the board. But if they have the opportunity of making the recording of what you have, what you have told them, it will help them to be able to go back to it, knowing fully well that they cannot even write it down. So, but some of these things are not available. We talk about e-book, but how many of our e-book are designed in such a way that they can be read through audio? You understand now? So some of the, and then we have text-to-speech softwares, and we also have speech-to-text softwares. In advanced countries, we see a situation where the lecturer will be teaching in the class. The teachers will be teaching in the class, and as he's teaching, it will be writing it on the board, automatically. We have some softwares like that on phone, and this can help the hearing impaired, that even if they are in a mainstream school and the teacher is teaching other students without disabilities, and they are there, as the teacher is speaking, the app will be recording some of these things down, will be writing some of these things out clearly, and they will be able to see, and they will be able to participate effectively.
I think Mr. Dinabi is quite right. The major issue right now is the fact that there are no implementations. So for instance, when we started distributing our AI app for the visually impaired, we discovered that when we mapped out about several, virtually none of them actually make use of technology. So most of them, for instance, the visually impaired schools still make use of Braille to read and stuff like that. And so currently, at that point in time, we had to look for a way to try and stimulate adoption. I think that was the first thing we tried to do. Stimulate adoption, made them see how this could help. And over time, we also had to train them. So one thing I would say is, yeah, the policies are there, but I think it should go beyond just making policies, but trying to effectuate these policies, trying to ensure these policies are implemented, because the rate of penetration and adoption of technology is quite still very low. And as much as, maybe entrepreneurs or startups, tech startups can try and effectuate or implement some of these things on their own, to really stimulate large adoption and large penetration. I think the government will actually have to be the one who wants to champion that.
What skills, knowledge, and capacities need to be developed and sustained for the successful adoption and implementation of EdTech for learners with disabilities?
So with respect to implementation, I think what the government should really do from their own hand is look for technological companies, look for startups that are trying to do this, try to partner with them, not necessarily fund, but just try to partner with them to ensure that they gain easy access to all these organizations. That's one. And two, the government should actually work with institutions like, for instance, universities, schools like University of Lagos, University of Ibadan, and try to see how they could implement or develop segments within those organizations where visually impaired persons can easily gain access to technology, that can help them, or people with disabilities can gain access to technology that can help them. So, for instance, maybe having an inclusive library, and in that inclusive library, try to put in or implement devices, technologies that can actually aid people with disabilities, like text-to-speech apps or speech-to-text apps, and stuff like that. So I think that's pretty much one of the ways that can really help to drive change.
Final question: what systemic changes need to take place so that EdTech for learners with disabilities can be effective, sustainable, and of course achieve positive education outcomes?
Well, let me just be sincere and just take only one point. And I believe that if this one point can be taken seriously, it will go a long way. And the only one point I'm going to mention is inclusive budgeting. It's as simple as that. Whatever we say here, whatever policy we have, whatever legal frameworks we have, whatever guidelines we have within the system, if some of these things are not budgeted for, it's as good as nothing. It means that we are not going, no matter what we say. So I would rather suggest that all of us together, parents of persons with disabilities, associations of persons with disabilities, organizations of persons with disabilities, entrepreneurs, let us all embark on advocacy towards inclusive budgeting. And that is when we can now demand that government specifically create budget lines for some of these issues, you know, in the budget of each state and even at the national level. And from there, we can now begin to advocate for budget releases to implement some of these things, because most of these things that we are talking about are not things that individuals can do alone. They are things that, in fact, they are the responsibilities of the government. Citizens can only support.
But I think it's also important that we recognize the importance of data. You know, a lot of times we have all these conversations, but we don't have enough information to back up, you know, our requests, what we want, the change that we want to see. And, you know, within the disability space, one of the biggest issues that we have is this lack of information or data about the situation of, you know, persons with disability. And now in this situation, learners with disability, we know that a lot of horrible things, we know that the situation of learners with disabilities is in a deplorable state, but we don't have that information documented enough to use to drive advocacy. So we can have all these conversations, we can keep saying all the things that we want to say, but we need tangible evidence that can show that, you know, EdTech has an important role to play.
Schools of disabilities, organizations of disabilities, institutions that, you know, try to help people with disabilities, should they themselves also try to see how they could, you know, go the extra mile in trying to get resources and access, that they can use to help people with disabilities, because some of this technology are actually very much available. Some of these technologies actually, they are actually free. So, you know, we ourselves, you know, that we're trying to, you know, advocate, can also try and go the extra mile to see how we could gain access to more technology and use it to train the students that you have with you. And we can now look at the government to try and, you know, help to make this more substantial over time.
Thank you so much. So it is inclusive budgeting that will be supported by data, partnerships, and more awareness. We'd like to say thank you so much. For our listeners and viewers, we'd like to hear from you. What actions need to be taken to leverage education for learners with disabilities? What actions need to be taken to leverage education for learners with disabilities? Join our EdTech Monday Nigeria channel on Telegram. And you can also send us a text or WhatsApp message on 0703 165 0809. 0703 165 0809. We would love to hear what you think. To Dinabi, Amaka, and Tommy, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your thoughts and your concerns and solutions.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. My name is Joyce Daniel. It's been a privilege moderating the show today, and we look forward to seeing you again or having you join us same time next month. Bye for now.